Okay.
Well, good evening, Adam. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening and participating in our virtual forum and in the democratic process in our community. I'm Andrea Austin. I'll be asking you the main questions, and Michael Murphy will be asking follow-up questions. We have 6 categories of questions, and if we have time, we may ask some additional ones at the end. So I'm just going to jump right in with our introduction. We have 5 minutes for this section. The first question, we have 3 minutes. Please tell us how long you've lived in Chapel Hill and why you're running. What previous involvement in community issues or other experiences make you a good candidate?
All right. Well, I've lived in Chapel Hill my whole life for 54 years. I have went to the elementary school at Ephesus Church Elementary, Phillips, and Chapel Hill High School. So I've been here and been through the school system as well. I left for college. Unfortunately, I went to University of California, so hopefully no one will hold that against me. Like many of us, I wanted to get away, and then came back and did my law and public health degrees here at UNC. So I'm also been married for almost 25 years to my wife, Mimi Chapman. We've raised, or are in the process of raising 2 sons, one who is at UNC and the other one who is in the Chapel Hill school system at East. So I've been here, raised my kids here, and have a lot of connections here.
Terrific, thank you. In recent years, pooled developer campaign donations have become more common. Do you intend to accept campaign donations from people outside Chapel Hill who do business with the town?
No, I don't. And I say that on my website. I would like to go back. I don't think I answered the other part of your first question, which
Correct.
was, why are you running? And
Yes, we would like to hear.
So why I was running is that I have been involved for the last few years in setting up a community group to try and save a public forest here in town called the Green Track Forest. I'm a mountain bike coach and often take kids out there biking, and have been hiking and riding around places in Chapel Hill. It was threatened by town development. It's a public forest, and that sort of pushed my buttons enough to get me involved. Since I've been in, this has been a very educational process, and I've been talking with many people, and I'm realizing that my isolated issue that got me to jump into the race is actually a much broader issue in the town and town politics, and that's our public lands and public forests and parks being sort of consumed by our development pressures and our sort of build at any cost mindset for development. So that's why I'm running.
Great.
So our second set of questions has to do with the housing mix in Chapel Hill. In 3 minutes, please discuss affordable housing needs in our community.
Well, we do have significant affordable housing needs in our community, and anyone who lives here knows that. And I've lived in everything from townhouse apartments, which was affordable housing back in the 70s when my dad was hired here as a very young faculty member, and I lived there with staff and other families, to living in houses in my favorite neighborhood in Chapel Hill at Richfield, Barker, and Briarcliff, to other places. So we have a need that really is it's hard to meet, but we're trying, I think, in Chapel Hill, and we're punching above our weight. We passed a $10 million bond issue, which I voted for that and supported it a few years ago, which has provided some funding for us to do collaboration and work with groups like UNC to establish housing out on certain town properties that are appropriate for that. Just in comparison, I think as part of this campaign, I've been looking at some of this issue a little more closely. And Greensboro, which is 5 times our size, at the same time, they passed an affordable bond issue, but it was only about twice what we did, to 25 million as opposed to 10. So we really are, making quite a bit of effort here in town to do this. However, there are some bumps in the road. We have 3 projects, one of which is on Homestead Road, which is actually starting a little bit, and we're going to start, I think, because UNC is very eager to get going on their part of it. We have a part of it that's less farther along with some of our other partners. And then on J Street, we have a debate going on with whether to build on some very steep town property that's over there near town. And then we have Trinity Park, which is a housing project owned by the town, which has been empty for years, and nothing has been done with that. So those are three places where we can really move quickly, I think, to start building places where people can live. We need to look at our negotiation tactics with private developers as we require affordable housing, and at what level in all these gazillions of new projects that are going up. While at the same time, we don't want to just let our town be run roughshod over, as we're seeing with some of the enormous development pressures that are happening right now.
Okay.
So let me just ask a couple of follow-up questions on that.
Okay.
I think you touched on some of this this stuff, but one of the concerns that many people have is that Chapel Hill had some organic affordable housing and certain neighborhoods that were traditionally minority. And what can we do to avoid displacement of the existing lower income people that are already in affordable housing? The other thing is that it seems that most of the housing, affordable housing development is concentrated, which is something that we probably don't want to see happen. If we can avoid it, we'd rather see it more dispersed. How can we ensure that housing isn't segregated by race?
All right, two good questions. So
That's 2 minutes you've got.
2
Okay.
minutes. Okay, this is
Quick.
trying to lobby a Republican state senator. All right, number one, the question about how to preserve our current stocks of housing and keep people in housing. I mean, that's a real tough one, but there are several different things we can do, I think. So the first thing is we do have, these models of the land trusts. And I think some organizations in town, like the CDC organization Empowerment, is doing a good job of buying up some of these properties and then reselling them, making sure that they're able to have more control over what the neighborhood looks like, not sell to investors and, that sort of thing. So that's good. That's one way we can do this. The other thing is I think about I really have been thinking a lot about this with our apartment complexes. I just, replacing them with these giant luxury structures. That's what went up in the townhouse apartments where I used to live. And, rather than rehabilitating these places, making them really high quality, but not making them into, luxury condominiums or apartments where we're just going to rent to students, I think is another option for that. Now, I'm sorry, your second question was?
I think that was the second question was that many of the newer affordable housing groups are very concentrated. We tend to build 100-unit affordable housing developments.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something we just don't need to build these huge. I mean, we have to get away from building these giant structures. I think, I do think like a place like Trinity Park or J Street, if we can focus on making, not just packing as much as we can in, but, doing density, but really making these places attractive and, a part of the neighborhoods that they're in, places people want to live, rather than, just being a place that we're trying to put up for the least amount of money, I think is a key part of that. The other thing I've been thinking of, as, in this topic, I don't know if we're going to talk more about it, affordable housing, is that we really need to partner more with UNC. And UNC is our largest employer. 40% of everybody working in town is with them. They have a lot of lower income employees, and they also have a lot of land, and they have a whole variety of income levels from folks who are newly hired, to be on the faculty, who are very young, who may be able to pay them out but not buy a house, to staff in the physical plant or housekeeping or food service. And if we could partner with UNC to provide housing for these folks, at that level, I think we could get a really nice diverse mix.
So real quick, kind of the last follow-up question has to do with how do we use the new tools that we have? We have a new zoning tool called conditional zoning that allows the town council to put unique conditions on it in return for upzoning a piece of property, which will return millions and millions of dollars to a developer. How do we use that leverage effectively to make sure that we have the proper mix of housing?
Well, you're running at the limits of what, my knowledge on all this stuff, but I have done a lot of negotiations through my career when I was in, sitting down in Raleigh with insurance companies and stuff. And it seems to me that you take the tools that you have, the need that we have is for more affordable places to live. But especially after this pandemic year, there is some money to be made for these developers in town. So I think it seems to me that we would have more leverage to insist on greater percentages of what they're building to be classified, however we're going to classify it as affordable, than we have before, just simply because we have those tools you're talking about. And if we can take a little bit of a stronger line on, some of these issues, I just don't want to, approve anything and not have that issue be dealt with. But again, I'm learning so much, and I'm sure I'll learn more about this when I get on the couch.
Let's go ahead and move on to our, our economy section. We have 9 minutes for this section. And the first question is, how has the form-based code as implemented in Chapel Hill's Blue Hill District strengthened our economy? How or how not? 3 minutes for that question.
All right, 3 minutes. For task masters. Well, no, I think is the answer. And I grew up riding my bike down Ephesus Church Road. And when I have been there recently and seen what one housing consultant described as a Disney cruise liner going up on the left side of the road as you go down the hill, I don't think anybody can sit here and argue with a straight face that that is the kind of development that we want in town. And this is one of the things I've learned in my, in jumping into this and talking to people and, getting involved at a level where I hadn't been before. That code that allowed that, it needs to go. There's just no question about it. I don't know, it's not part of what we want. And there was some validation for that when this national housing expert who the council had hired, I was watching his presentation, and he was of the same, feeling that this just was not working. So we're just adding a ton of people. There's no walkability in that area. It's not like people are going to walk over to the grocery store or to, it's just almost impossible to cross Fordham Boulevard there. It makes no sense. And so I think we need to go down and really get rid of that code. Don't let anything else go up, and take a good look at what we really want in that area.
So since you've already touched on the Rod Stevens report, obviously
right.
You read it. I'll jump to that question first and let you continue on. What kind of course corrections do you think we need to make, given what we've learned from that report?
Well, a lot of people found that report interesting, and I did too. And he seemed to say, it was almost, let's take a pause in all development and bring someone in and really try and plan for the whole town, which I think sounds like a good idea. It
doesn't sound to you, Adam, like a consultant asking for more work.
No. Well, let me finish. So I'm very skeptical, because I've been involved in many town processes and put stars on many, sticky notes stuck on the side of walls, and often my voice has not been heard. So I am very, very skeptical of anyone who says, let's bring in some fancy outsider and do something else. But I think if we coupled something like that with a stop to or a repeal of the code that's allowing these things to happen already, that might be something, we could do instead of just, we could go back to what we, had before. I think the overwhelming, the overriding concern here is not to have another Disney cruise ship go down in the market. The other thing I will say, and this speaks to delay and to getting more advice. As much as I hate this, I used to, I can't believe I'm saying this, given the amount of meetings I've been in, but I don't think that that report and the fellow who did it took into account the huge changes that in work and home that are happening during and after the pandemic.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of his conclusions are based on growth estimates and the definition of who's commuting in and out of town that may fundamentally change. And if you look at anything else, like, there are all sorts of other fancy consultants like Kinsey or whatever, trying to look at what's happening in the workforce. And a lot of the jobs that we have in Chapel Hill are information jobs that, and, in managerial positions or information in the park that can be done at home. And so, a friend of mine who's been working in the park for years, he's been working at home for the last years, and he's had no intention of going back to the park for 5 days a week. So is that going to change?
Adam, just to move it along, I think that is absolutely true. That things will change drastically. We're in an inflection period. Just to quickly touch on supporting small businesses, because that's obviously growing a strong community. Everybody points to economic development, bringing more business, get tax revenue from that rather than from residential. What policies do you think we can do to support and keep small local businesses?
Well, I hate to sound like a broken record, and I'm saying this again, but I did this great thing this summer, threw my all our stuff in the car, camping gear and everything, and my 14-year-old son, and we loved to bike, and we threw the bikes on the car, and we drove all over the country for 5 weeks, and we were in tons of towns like, Bentonville in Arkansas, and Boise in Idaho, and Waldport in Oregon that you never heard of, but they have really emphasized their green space and trails and recreation, outdoor recreation. They're very, putting not a ton of money, but some, and emphasis on trying to attract people from out, whether it's within their state. A lot of places we went, people wouldn't know nationally, some they would, but attracting people from their state to come visit. And I was so struck by how many restaurants we went into in these towns that were packed, it was so clear how many hotels were full, how hard it was to find a place to stay when we were trying to, hard to get a campsite, we were trying to camp out. And really these towns are bringing more business into town. They're not just bringing, it's not some pie in the sky guy going, oh, we want to go bike and stuff. They're families, it was this emphasis on outdoor recreation. And I think we could do some of that here. We don't have to go whole hog and become some destination, but we already have people who want to come here for the university, who are coming here for our football games, for our cultural events. But if we just preserve some of the stuff we have already in our woods and our trails and stuff and upgraded it a bit, a lot of these other towns that I saw personally around the country are really bringing in, serious dollars and serious business. And we should try and do that too.
Okay. Julie, are we out of time for this? Do I need to skip the last question?
I think you can go for this last question. It's important.
Okay. So the last question here has to do with net revenue and the benefits of residential housing. There's a big question, and we haven't been able to get a good answer. Does residential pay for itself, or is it a net expense? And do you need to balance it for every piece of residential you put in? You need a certain percentage commercial or other things to be able to balance the revenue.
And I'll just add, we have a study that was done, and somebody helped me with the date, I can't remember, 2008, somewhere around there, that says that residential doesn't pay for itself, but commercial does. But the town has not seen fit to do such a study.
And obviously the Stevens report shows, I mean, we're putting in a tremendous amount of rental housing, right? Which may be net negative, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Right. And this is a complicated problem. I think that it is made even more complicated by the changes that we were just talking about earlier, that we don't have a huge handle on exactly what's going to happen with the pandemic. But for example, if we do have more people staying here in our community to work rather than going somewhere else, then that's a whole new need for commercial, development. It may mean, like any of these changes, somebody else loses. So like, for instance, I used to commute to downtown Raleigh to work, and I'd eat lunch and, hang out and buy stuff downtown every day. But if I'm able to just stay at home now and work here, that provides a whole set of, a whole different set of customers for the businesses we have. And we really have to think, like, what does that mean for our business? Does it mean that we do, more Wegmans and stuff? I don't know. I mean, that could be, that was, they have a lot of prepared things. Does it mean for our downtown that we're able to get, more stuff down there? I don't know, but I do think there's a lot of opportunities for us with these changes happening to deal with exactly that problem.
Well, thank you.
Let's transition to our green infrastructure section. What are your priorities for green infrastructure for the town, such as parks, tree canopy, transit, stormwater control, greenways, and green spaces? And how would you act on them as a council member? We have 3 minutes for this question.
A lot of ground.
All right, this is the topic that I got into, this race for, and the topic that I love. So look, I mean, this is what makes Chapel Hill great, is our green space, our trees, our parks. These are the things that when the hundreds of people I've talked to, invariably people talk about when they talk about Chapel Hill. And these are things worth preserving. And to me, this is not preserving, a small green space with a few trees and a, swing set in some development. This is preserving swaths of our tree canopy, of our public forests, of our public parks, so that everybody can use them. And not just letting them sit there, but actually invest into making trails and green infrastructure like that we can really bring people in. And it's not just the bike trails, which I love, obviously, but it's also wider trails. I was talking to this fellow who works with developmentally disabled folks in some of the group homes around town. And he was telling me how he loves taking the folks who he's responsible for out into Carolina North and some of our other parks, and walking in the woods, not on, this is not, the Greenway doesn't do it for them, in the woods on trails that are surfaced enough so that people who have mobility problems do not fall down, and how just wonderful it is, and how he feels like he is really helping these folks who normally don't have much of a voice in our community have a great experience, and how he doesn't want that to go away. That's the kind of experiences that we should be providing for people in our community. We can start with our building better trails, using the public forests and parks and greenways we have already. And then we can also look to improving our greenway system. We do have, it doesn't mention mountain biking except once in an appendix, but we do have a very good mobility and bike plan that has hundreds of millions of dollars of ideas of where we should put better greenways. I think there's some good ideas in there. I obviously don't agree with everything, but I do agree with a lot of them. Like it gives us a place to go. And if we can look towards sister cities that have done a better job like this, like Raleigh and Durham, we can do some of that here.
So that kind of leads to two of the follow-up questions. One is that Chapel Hill still has some open tracts of land. East Town Heritage Site, the Green Track, J Street, the Legion Road property, things of that sort. And obviously, we're going to struggle. And one of the things the council is going to struggle with is how to prioritize what you do with those properties, right? And then the other question is what can we learn about green infrastructure from other communities, which you point to Raleigh. So maybe you could talk about that.
Okay, so what to do about the green?
Well, what to do about the open tracks to begin with? How do you prioritize, and what are your thoughts on that? Because everybody that's running for council has different priorities.
Yeah. Okay, what I have observed so far in my foray into our politics, which has been a bumpy ride at times, is that we have a clash of visions. And one vision is to build on every piece of property we have that we can possibly build on and save a little bit for along the creek or something, although sometimes that doesn't even work when we want to control stormwater. We're apparently going to cut trees on the creeks. The other vision is the vision that I have, which is let's prioritize saving the best and most beautiful parts and the entire tracts of land that we have. We have so much development going on elsewhere that every time we sell or build on a public piece of property, it's not that we should never do it, but that it should really be a question as to whether we're getting enough of a benefit out of that development, as opposed to the other things we were talking about, the recreational uses, the benefits to people who often don't have a voice in our community, the benefits to everyone else who likes being able to go to a beautiful park. We want to do a lot of things in Chapel Hill. We want to build affordable housing. We want to encourage small businesses. I agree with that, but we do a lot of those things. We don't prioritize parks as much as we should. And I think that if going forward, especially with these pieces of property, we really need to have a stronger voice saying, let's save the whole thing for a park at this property. That not to compromise on that.
So that was, I think, one of the messages that at least I got from the Stevens report, was that if you're going to be able to attract developers to build the kind of developments that you want, you have to have an attractive infrastructure for them to come in and want to do that, which I would argue would include the parks. The question that kind of, I think, dovetails with that is what do we see other communities doing? What you say you've gone all over the country and you've seen other communities do things that are wonderful.
I'm sorry, what can we do here?
What can we learn? Yes.
What can we, it was such a privilege to be able to do this. And I don't think I would have done it without the pandemic, because we drove, I haven't driven across the country since I was probably in my 20s, driving to see my, then girlfriend in Utah or whatever, or driving across to California. And then the privilege to go to these towns that aren't tourist towns, that are not normally places you would think of. I'm sure we went to places like, like in Colorado and Crested Butte, but to see places that are more like Chapel Hill and kind of get a sense of what they're doing. And the town I think I like best was in this regard, we had just a great time, was Boise, Idaho. And they have a lot of space behind the city. It's bigger than, it's more the size of Durham than it is of Chapel Hill. They have a lot of space behind the city in what they call the foothills, but it's not the same kind of green trees and forests that we have here. So it's much more a harsher environment. But they've really prioritized their outdoor recreation. They've built like a giant jump park for kids. They've put these trails in. They've done like, a real, parks for skating and parks for, hanging out by the river. We could do a lot more of that stuff here. We have the beauty, we have the land, we have the ability to do it. We're sitting right next to hundreds of acres of federal property that is managed by the North Carolina Fish and Wildlife Service, as part of the wetlands and that were created in mitigation for Jordan Lake. These already have beautiful trails over them all over the place. But it's all informal. There's dispute between the management, but these are resources that we can use to really make this an amazingly attractive place to live. And
So
I
you
think
pick Boise, which is, you know, the poster child is the fastest growing, you know, community in the United States, right? And also the fastest appreciation of property values as well.
There's a lot of similarities.
So there's a lot of similarities with Chapel Hill, and maybe we can learn some things. Let's real quick touch on pedestrian and bike improvements. What would you prioritize?
All right. Well, I was just writing about this for the Sierra Club, and I was writing in there how I used to commute on my bicycle from downtown Chapel Hill in the early 1980s out to Chapel Hill High School every single day, and then I would ride after school. I'd ride from Chapel Hill High into Carborough, work at one of the bike shops, and then ride home. So, and no one else was doing that. I was the only person at Chapel Hill. They actually, one of the health teachers let me use one of the empty rooms in the building that they tore down to store my bicycle. So I've been dealing with the infrastructure and bicycling around here for years and years and years. I've seen it get worse. I've seen it get better. What we need to prioritize, I think, are a couple things. We really, really need to figure out a way to get people up the hill safely in Chapel Hill. You just are not going to have people who are comfortable on a bike, who are not that comfortable on a bike, rather, riding up into downtown where we want people to go to spend money. You know, that we have one road after, you know, my 40 years of doing this that has bike lanes up it to downtown. That's unacceptable. So we've got to, and I'm not thinking more bike lanes, I'm thinking we need some sort of other paths or other systems to get people up there. So that's one thing we need to do. The second thing is, you know, we have a lot of opportunity to, you know, in that mobility plan to expand some of our greenways across in the, I hate calling it that Blue Hill district, in the Ephesus Road district, across near where University Mall is now, across Fordham Boulevard safely and back into the roads and trails that go to Meadowmont. So, you know, that's an easy expansion that we could undertake, which wouldn't cost, you know, which is in that list of stuff to do, which wouldn't cost a lot of money. Okay. You know, I mean, I could go on. I have other.
Yeah, no, let's because this is obviously your one of your hot buttons. So you know, give you a little flexibility here, but the climate action plan. Everybody's commented on the climate action plan, and one question we like to ask is, can you give us an example of some short-term achievable goals
for climate action? Yeah. All right. So this is another thing that I'm learning about. You know, we need to take action on the climate, and we need to do it yesterday. And, you know, we need systemic action from the state, federal government, and internationally. But we can do stuff here in Chapel Hill too. I learned that, you know, we spend more money in Chapel Hill in our budget on our transit system, on our buses, than we do on anything else. And that's awesome. You know, I mean, we are putting money into, you know, getting cars off the road. So we're definitely able to do that. I think the thing, and I don't want to be a broken record about this, but, you know, when you talk about climate and acting on the climate, if you're cutting down tons of trees, that's not improving your climate. And so I think we need to make that a consideration when we are not just with these public, you know, developments, but also some of these private developments too. We're really losing a lot of tree canopy and a lot of tree cover. We have a lot of new research that's showing that that's important, not just for climate, but for, you know, people's lives as well.
Good answer. Thank you. Julie or Anita?
Andrea.
Yeah, so let's move on to our public engagement section. We have just about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure we have some time at the end for follow-up questions. So town council and staff have had many outreach planning exercises, so engaging the community, and they've adopted town plans reflecting that engagement. How would you be guided by these plans as you make land use decisions?
Well, this is, you know, the land use decisions are one of the two main jobs of being on the council, and the other one being the budget. the issues I've had over the years, and one thing that my frustration is that I often felt like my voice was not heard in some of these, when I would go to these meetings and have these discussions. And I think there's a couple problems. I think one, going back to our original talk about planning, when the community voices are filtered through these very fancy consultants who get their marching orders from the town, that sometimes that, you know, in the final report, your voice doesn't appear. And, you know, I think that's a problem. And I don't know exactly how to deal with that. I think maybe hire less fancy consultants, maybe if we do hire somebody, or if we are being a process, give people more of a, you know, direction to make sure those comments are, you know, brought forward. And I also think let's try and minimize the amount of things that we do. Every time we ask the community to participate in one of these processes, we are asking an enormous amount from community members. We're asking for their time, their effort, their energy. And if we just don't disregard what they said, then, you know, people eventually just go, we don't want to do it anymore. And I certainly have felt like that. And when I'm in this process, like I looked at the Legion Road Park, you know, meeting, the community meeting, and the debate there was what should we do with the park? Should we have pickleball, or should we do, you know, tennis courts or whatever? That was the debate. It wasn't, let's put a bunch of commercial, you know, development on one side and sell off another part of it. So, you know, I think that's a good example of where the community speaks, and they're not, that report isn't maybe as given as high a priority as others. So.
Okay, real quickly, just kind of as a follow-up, what are your ideas on being able to increase engagement, or you know, ways of doing that, and especially within you know, marginalized communities?
I mean, this is, you know, this is something I've done professionally for years, and is not easy. And I think you have to go out to the community and really meet with people. And if you're not doing that, then it's very hard to ask people to come to things. You know, I mean, you can go out, you can conduct meetings. If you do that, you know, you maybe you're successful, but I think that sort of personal contact can be helpful. You know, in the town context, I'm not surprised. We can partner more with leaders in the community. I mean, that's how you get through and get out people who are, you know, maybe reluctant. So that's another strategy. Maybe there are other things that we can do, but we need to reach out more.
Someone put their something on mute.
For the first time, an all-civilian crew of 4 will be sent into Earth's orbit. CBS's Mark Strassman reports tonight from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
Somebody's got.
Are you able to mute everybody, Julie, as the host?
Julie, can you just mute Margaret? I think it's Margaret.
Exploration Force
Okay.
crew that dreams now both in the stars and in the
Got it.
Got it. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Sorry, Adam.
Hey, no worries.
So are we done with that one? So we're ready for the next question?
Were you able to finish your thought, Adam?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we actually faced this with we really wanted to, when I was with the mountain bike coaching the last few years, we were really, in Renuka knows this too, because she was involved before I was, that we really wanted to diversify as much as possible these teams, and, you know, approaching that, it's, you know, trying to get parents involved and approaching the community. We're just really struggling with how to do this. So it's not, you know, let's just acknowledge this is not easy, and it's for a good reason. I mean, people have a lot of other things to do, like, you know, work and take care of kids and stuff. And, you know, it's a privilege to be able to participate in some of these things, you know, that if you have more money, you're able to do it. So, you know, we just need to make it as easy as possible, and then respect what people say and respect what it does. And I've seen that, you know.
Well, Adam, our final question, and then possibly some follow-up questions. Please give an example of a town council decision that you agreed with and one that you disagreed with, and explain why.
Okay, so the one I disagreed with was the decision to move forward with splitting up the green tract for development. You know, I think this was ill-considered. It didn't respect the wishes of the community. There have been 20 years of community processes that had asked for majority of the property to be preserved, and 20% set aside for sort of the low impact affordable housing and character with the existing neighborhoods around the property. And that was just not followed. That was just thrown out. And I think it actually, I have spent a lifetime working on issues in politics and healthcare, and I saw some of the worst behavior among politicians that I've ever seen. And this
Was
is
the
coming from
worst.
somebody who,
It was the
used to
worst.
see senators drinking to excess in their offices in the North Carolina General Assembly. So, that says a lot. So that's the first thing. The decision I agree with. I'm so excited when this partnership with UNC to, and the Horizons program to build housing for families on and this is on town property that was already cleared, by the way, on Homestead Road. It's just great. This is exactly what we should be doing. We should be working with our biggest partner here in town to help families, in this case, women who have kids who are really needing some housing and support to get their lives back on track after UNC has been helping them. And that's exactly what we should be doing. So it's that I'd like to see more of that kind of collaboration and less of this, in your face politics.
All right. Do we have any additional questions from my fellow interviewers?
I think we're on to the follow-up questions. Anybody have?
Right.
Adam, I appreciate you saying that you've been to meetings and your opinion has not been regarded. And I felt the same way, and I know other people have too. What would you do to help the community input be listened to more?
I'm trying to think back. I've been to so many meetings where, the town meetings are where I felt particularly disregarded. I think one thing is to maybe have less of these fancy consultants doing this work. I think, it should be, if you're going to go listen to people, go listen to people. We don't need to filter it as much. It does take some of the pressure off. I understand the time pressures there, but I think if we can do fewer meetings but really have higher quality and have people actually from the council actually listening to that does provide some accountability. And I always appreciated that when we were having community meetings around healthcare and stuff. It wasn't like we might have hired someone or some staff would arrange it and get to know people in the community. Those are some of our most successful meetings, getting to know people in the community, meeting with with community leaders before there's a meeting, making sure that we have a bunch of people who are in attendance, who are interested, who know what the topic is, but then also showing up yourself and saying, okay, I'm here to actually listen. It doesn't mean that you're gonna, your ideas may not get through, but I think at least being there and acknowledging that later that what has been said are both important things.
I had a quick follow-up, Adam, and that would be, it seems to me you have a lot of background in building coalitions. So could you just comment on those skills that you could use with your colleagues on the council? Because so often a council person that's effective is one that can build coalitions and on the
Right.
council for something.
Right. And that's been true my whole career. I think I've worked on multiple coalitions, and these are advocacy coalitions around, specific topics or areas. So whether it's healthcare or children, improving children's lives, or, making Blue Cross not become a for-profit company. But I think what the key is that you can take, in my experience, is you can get people who disagree together if you really boil down what you can agree on to, one or two a couple things, and then just kind of sit down. And that's a whole process of getting to that, to that agreement. And at that point, if you have enough trust to move forward with that, everybody might not get exactly what they want, but you know, there, if you narrowed down your focus to that, to those things, then that's a good thing to do. I think also you need to have, you know, you don't need to have a chip on your shoulder. And I suspect this will be a problem. And I saw this in politics all the time. You know, there are some folks who get into politics, and I'm sure even local politics from what I've seen, because they're intending to move on to some higher office, or they're, you know, they're satisfying their constituency in some way, which is fine. That's part of the deal. But you have to be willing to, you know, sometimes compromise a little bit. You shouldn't give up your principles, because then nobody will want you around anyway. Although I guess we almost proved that wrong with Donald Trump. So, but you know, I think at least here we should, you know, we should expect that be the norm, rather than this, you know, just who can get, you know, if I've got 5 votes, too bad for you. And that may be where we get to. I don't know. I hope not. I mean, I've been very disappointed in I've been made multiple outreach attempts, you know, right after I filed, to multiple different groups. And many people have talked, and I've had a great time meeting people, but there have been many who haven't responded and haven't been willing to sit down. And I find that disappointing, but I hope we can overcome it.
Thank you. So we're ready to wrap up, are we, Andrea?
We are ready to wrap up. Thank you so much, Adam, for taking the time to answer our questions, and again, for running for office and being part of this process. So this recording will be made available online. And is that all, Julie?
I think so. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate
you,
you.
Adam.
For the opportunity.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. And
Bye-bye.
yeah, we'll see what happens. Okay. Thanks.